Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're going to do something a little bit different to anything that we have done on here before, because today I wanted to talk about my experience with being single for 1 year. So it's going to be an interesting one. Basically, as I said, I got to a point in my life where I decided to be fully single for 1 full year. And for me, the definition of being single meant 2 things. One, at that point, I was no longer in the depths of healing from my past relationship or the breakup that I'd been through. And so that chapter was a bit more closed. And then 2, moving forward for that full year, I wasn't even really talking to anyone. I was not conversing with anyone properly. I was not seeing anyone. I was not meeting anyone. I was not doing anything. I was really just fully by myself for that entire year. And it ended up being such an amazing experience and exactly what I needed. But it also ended up being much more challenging and overwhelming than anything that I could have anticipated. And so today, let's talk about all of that. I wanted to share why I took this choice in the first place, and then talk about some challenges that I went through and how I moved through those, and then how it ended up turning into such a great experience for me. And so yeah, there's a lot to talk about. But as always, before we get into it, I just want to say, if you enjoy my content, please feel free to like the video, comment down below, and make sure that you are subscribed if you aren't already. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to leave a 5-star review. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get right into today's conversation. Chapter 1, why? Why did I even take this choice? And this one's interesting because for me, it kind of feels like I wasn't even the one who took this choice for me. Life kind of took it for me, because before I went into that year, I was at a point in my life where I think I was really looking for answers in a way, because at that point I was not feeling great, let's say, because I was still struggling with a lot of things that had happened in my life. During that time when I really was looking for things to change, somehow out of nowhere, my life just went very quiet in a lot of different areas. But when it came to dating or relationships, suddenly I didn't even have anyone who I would have to say goodbye to. I didn't even have anyone who I was like 1% interested in, like nothing. And also there was nothing coming my way, like nobody was approaching me, nothing. It was really as if I was invisible for that time, which was interesting because that was not the case before. It just kind of happened out of nowhere. It kind of felt like life or God was telling me, well, we're taking all of this away because maybe you going down this path of just spending some time by yourself is exactly what you need and what you are looking for, even though you don't realize it at this point. Once I realized that me forcing things and me not seeing that was kind of going against what life was naturally bringing my way, that's when I was like, okay, if this is what's going on, we might as well just go and dive in head first. As I said, it ended up being exactly what I needed, but it also ended up being much more challenging than what I saw coming. Chapter 2, painkillers. I think the biggest thing that I had to realize during that year, which was also a pretty painful thing for me to see at first, was how disconnected I was from myself at that point and how much I was still running away from myself in a way. Because I think in life, we all go through painful or difficult situations, and those events almost leave injuries or wounds or cuts on our body. But the thing is, we're not taught how to heal those wounds. We're more just taught to continue and act as if they're not even there. Then what happens is we start to look for painkillers to numb the pain. And those can be things such as partying, alcohol, drugs, chasing money and fame, chasing validation, distracting ourselves, relationships, dating, lots of other things. But the thing is, think about it. When you really have an actual wound on your body, as many painkillers as you take, the only way to heal that wound is by your body healing that itself. And so the only person who can heal you is you. Everything else is really just a short-term fix. And so for me, one of the painkillers that I'd been using in my life for a long time was the idea of a relationship or just the presence of someone else. And it's interesting because before, I have never really been someone who's been very attached to the idea of a relationship or looking for that. But I think just because I had become used to that being a part of my life for so long, and especially during a time in my life where I had a lot of other things going on as well that I was struggling with, that kind of being the only constant that I really had during those ups and downs, that had become a painkiller for me without even realizing it until it was gone. That's when I realized it. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, the idea of the presence of someone else or even just someone to occupy our mind with becomes a way in which we also escape our own internal things or our fears or our loneliness or whatever it is that we are trying to avoid in a way. And that's why in the beginning, I specifically said that that year of being single for me was also marked by the fact that I was no longer in the depths of healing from my breakup and my past relationship, because even though going through a breakup is really hard and it feels horrible, in my experience, it became its own painkiller in its own weird way, because it was still me being distracted by something that was outside of me. It was me being occupied by something that involved another person, which became a way to not face what was going on entirely within me. And so this point of saying like, what the fuck's going on? I really don't know what to do with myself actually only came once I had already healed a lot from that, which was something that I didn't see coming, because now there was no pull to my past, but also no pull anywhere else. And so that was the point where I was like, now I don't know what's going on. Chapter 3, challenges. In the beginning, I thought it was going to be easier than I thought, because I was like, well, I've never really had a problem with being by myself, so I don't think I'm going to have a problem now. But a couple of weeks into it, I just started to feel awful, like really awful, because that's where I have to add, generally during that year of my life, I didn't really have a lot going on in my life. I didn't have a lot of people in my life, and I had lost a lot more people than I had expected. And so there was a lot that went into it, but regardless of that, I just suddenly had so much space and so much silence and so many distractions that had fallen away for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and it felt like it just didn't end. And that's where I really started to feel like I have been a person who's been on painkillers for a long time, metaphorically, and now those painkillers are gone, and really all I'm feeling is the pain of these wounds, like all the time. What I didn't realize is that if you have been operating on painkillers, again, metaphorically, for a really long time, then your body and your mind has become used to that, almost addicted to that, because it doesn't know that there is another way to heal anymore. It can't remember that that is the case. And so once you cut off one painkiller, the mind and the body will do anything to find another painkiller to substitute that, because anything to not feel that pain. It's almost like survival in a way. And so what did my body and mind try to do? Find other painkillers. And this was almost going on without me even realizing it. It was almost something that was happening very subconsciously, but it was just something to not feel the pain, something to numb whatever I was feeling. I remember a couple of weeks in, and I was just glued to my phone. I was glued to my phone. I was spending hours and hours and hours just scrolling on my phone, not even watching anything of substance, just like anything that would distract me from myself. And the minute I realized, well, I'm glued to my phone and this has become my next distraction, and this is not good, I need to get this under control. The minute I realized that, it was almost as if my mind had already found the next thing. I remember there was a couple of weeks as well where I was just listening to music 24/7. Like I was really living with my noise canceling headphones on my head, and everyone around me, especially my family, was so irritated by me all the time because I was not conversing with anyone. I was not talking with anyone. I was never really there and never really present. Or there was another phase where I was just eating junk food and eating sugar, like no stopping it, because that had become the next thing kind of. And there were a lot of other things that I used as painkillers as well, which were just not good things. It was so hard for me to just be by myself for longer period of times, or be still, or just do things that were calmer, because calm for me meant feeling whatever I didn't want to feel, and that was just a little bit too much. So I was just trying everything to avoid that. Chapter 4, small moments of happiness. For me, it was about not beating myself up for the moments where I didn't manage, but more getting into the practice of doing more things that would help me connect with myself. And so I spent a big part of that year just spending a lot of time in nature and making art and being creative and reading and meditating and spending time with people that I love, or friends or family, because for me, it was never about locking myself up in a dark room and spending 1 year alone until I managed to figure it out all by myself. Even if it was about talking to people and finding support in that way, it was just about doing more things that would help me connect back with myself, so that disconnecting from myself would become less and less interesting. And trying to make those things part of my life more, I think kind of sounds like a beautiful thing to do. It's those things you see on social media and everything, like being in nature and spending time with friends and reading. It looks very romantic and nice. But for me, the first moments where I did that, I was always struggling very, very much, because I didn't want to spend time with nature. I didn't want to go for a walk in nature. I didn't want to meditate. I didn't want to be still. I didn't want to be present, because being present meant feeling things that I just did not want to feel. And so in the beginning, those moments were really hard for me. Like I remember once I went into to a place in nature for 3 days just to kind of calm down and get my head clear. And those 3 days, even though it was the most beautiful place in nature, it was like from a movie, those 3 days were horrible for me. They were so hard for me. Not always easy, but exactly the point where it became a real challenge. Exactly that point, or those points, when I started to push through those points, on the other side of those was exactly what I was looking for. Slowly, I started to feel better, and I started to feel these moments of joy and happiness that started almost like glimpses, very, very short moments that I almost couldn't grab, but they were there enough that I would think, whoa, what was that? I have not felt that in a long time. And then slowly over time, those moments became more and more, because what I realized is when you are disconnected from your emotions and running away from your emotions, then it might work to not have to feel those things, and then you feel better for some time. But the thing is, when you numb yourself, you numb all of you. You cannot just numb the heavy parts and keep the moments of joy and beautiful. When you're numb, you are just numbed. And that means if you are disconnected from yourself and from what you're feeling, you are also losing all of the beautiful and joyful and happy parts of you. And I think that is just a price that is not worth paying. And so that's where those moments of happiness came from. That's why they were starting to happen, because I had been operating on painkillers for so long. That had numbed the pain. And so all of that coming back in the way that it had been, based on the events that had happened in my life prior, was a lot to handle and something that I had to learn how to navigate. But at the same time, getting into the practice of reconnecting with myself also brought back all of the beautiful parts of me that I had lost and that I'd liked so much. And that's why I had been struggling so much. That's why I didn't like being myself, because I was not myself. And those moments were filled with so much joy and happiness and creativity and just laughter. And they were exactly what I had been looking for. It was not a linear process. It was more about you fall down, you get back up again. You fall down, you get back up again. But slowly, the more I did that started to solidify more. Chapter 5, coming back to myself. I think we all come into the world with a connection with ourselves and our own internal voice, which has all of the answers really and all of the joy that we are looking for. But we also come into a world that pushes a lot of other voices on us, whether that is family, teachers, friends, society, people around us, whatever it is. And so with all of those other voices in the head, it starts to get very loud and very confusing and more difficult to hear our own voice. And then it's really about the journey of just coming back to that, because that is really the only voice that you want to be following, and being connected to that is really the most important thing. And that's what the whole thing was about now looking back. And that's when for me it went from, oh, I've just been single for 1 year, to something that went way beyond that. It turned into a journey of coming back to myself and reconnecting back to myself, which is a journey that has continued until today and might even continue until forever. Probably it will, but I don't think that journey would have started in the way if I would have not decided to take that 1 year off and really sit with the space that all of that created in my life. And even now, of course, we are all a work in progress. And so it's not about feeling that connection with yourself 24/7 and it always being there and you never losing it, because that's not how life works. I think for me, that year was more about seeing the value in waking up every day and choosing to prioritize that to the best of my ability. And it's more a choice that you make rather than something that you manage all the time. And that's all that it's about, to remember that that's something that you can come back to eventually. I think once you find that again, and you know that whatever happens in your life, you can always come back to yourself, then it doesn't really matter what you do. It's kind of like a personal choice. If you then want to go out and go on 100 dates and meet all of the people and have all of the experiences, then you go and do that. Or if you don't want to do any of it, you don't do any of it. It doesn't really matter, because then whatever you're doing, it's an experience because you feel like you want to have that experience, and that experience will bring you to where you need to go. Then it's an individual journey, but those things don't become painkillers, and it's about staying in the practice of making sure that they don't become painkillers, because it can always happen again. But then again, it's just a choice that we make every single day. All right, everyone, that is all I wanted to share for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm very much looking forward to connecting with you in my next episode.